this meeting of the Fargo Public Library Board of Directors is called to order. Let's go ahead and take roll. So Rachel Steenholt?
Yep.
Whitney Oxendahl? Kristen Shippert?
Yes.
Thank you. Carrie Peterson?
Present.
Carlos?
Yes.
And Scott?
Yep.
Oh, Scott's here too. Great. Okay,
Yep,
so the only person missing is Whitney. Thank you. So the first action item is to approve the order of the agenda.
Chris Shipper, I move to approve the order of the agenda.
Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you.
Carlos.
All in favor of approving the order of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries and the order of the agenda is approved. The next item is the minutes of the February 16th meeting. This is an action item because last month we did not have a quorum and so we couldn't vote on the minutes. So the minutes of the February 16th meeting are in your packet. I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes unless anyone has any changes.
Move to approve, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.
Carrie Peterson seconds that.
All in favor of approving the minutes of the February 16th meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes of the February 16th meeting are approved. Next item is the minutes of the March 16th meeting. Those are also in your packets. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve. Carlos.
Thank you.
Second, Scott.
All in favor of approving the minutes of the March 16th meeting, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes of the March 16th meeting are approved. Now we have a staff report with Megan Richardson.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so you have my report in the board report. I will just give you some highlights. So staffing updates, we have a new LA1, Callie King, who started at Maine. She's starting this week. The LA2 position is still in the middle of the hiring process. Right now they're scheduling interviews for either later this week or next week, so that is moving along. National Library Week was the first week of April, and to celebrate National Library Workers Day, the staff development team gave library branded water bottles to each staff member. So thank you to a generous donation from the Friends. Programming updates. For the first time, the library is creating a kids-only edition for the library's lit publication, Northern Narratives. So there's going to be a Northern Narratives Juniors. So kids in kindergarten through 6th grade are welcome to submit entries for either short story, poetry, comics, essays, drawings, photographs they take through the end of this month. Prizes will be awarded for the first and second place, but all submissions are going to be included in the online magazine. The last Crafts to Go packets of this season is going out next week. Kids are doing Caterpillar clothespins, teens are doing mini seashell mobiles, adults are doing pinata party favors. Registration for that is currently open, and there are still spots available at most of the library locations for each of those. They're also doing a DIY spring care kit. This is recommended for adults, but it's open to anybody. Each kit has supplies to make a flower seed paper. It has a mug that you can decorate and the supplies to decorate it, and mix for mug cake. Registration for that just opened up yesterday, but I checked right before the board meeting and it looks like all 50 spots are already taken. So right now, everybody else registering is going onto a waiting list. There is also a new book club that met for the first time just this afternoon. It's a book club geared towards seniors. Again, anybody is welcome, but it's in the middle of a workday afternoon, so it's really focused on the retired age group that they plan to meet every other month. And then it has been a really long time, but we're having our first community engagement since before COVID started. So that's called World Book Night. That's this Friday, April 25th. It's from 4 to 6 at the new Broadway Square downtown. It's a cooperative effort between the library, Broadway Square, the Park District, NDSU Press, and the World Book Night organization, which I think was started in England. And so attendance is free. The library will be there answering questions. We can sign up people for library cards. The book bike will be there with things to check out. After the event, people are encouraged to go grab dinner or snacks somewhere downtown and then come back for like an hour of reading just in the square on Friday night, so that they're still doing masks and social distancing, but we're having an event kind of with people.
Awesome. That's very exciting. And I love the fact that we're utilizing the new space downtown, because that's such a fun spot. So that's great that we can take advantage of that and be outside. Hopefully the weather cooperates.
Hopefully it won't be snowing.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of cool stuff going on. The Northern Narratives Junior, that also sounds really exciting. So good job. Does anybody have any questions or things they'd like to discuss with Megan? Okay, doesn't sound like it, so thank you very much, Megan. Next on our agenda then is the director's report.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. You can see in your packet my report, pretty straightforward there. I would say the big news on the COVID front is, it's been really quiet in terms of staff and COVID. The other good news is we're looking to move to standard regular summer hours as of June 1st. All things being equal, all things being safe, to move to regular summer hours as of June 1st from the limited hours that we have currently. So unless somebody has questions per the report in the packet.
What would prevent the city from doing that? Would it just be an increase in COVID cases and concern locally? Or
I think if staffing was an issue, if a significant issue, would have to look at that, because that would be the biggest draw on us. I don't think the city, in terms, unless things got really bad, I think though the main thing for us as the library to move hours is the availability of staff to cover those hours.
Sure. Well, good. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, doesn't sound like it. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is unfinished business, the Directors Review Committee. I was not at the meeting last month, the library board meeting, but looking at the minutes, it looked like Rachel was able to give an update on our first meeting of the Directors Review Committee, which was held in February. And then we have not held a meeting since then due to some scheduling challenges. And so our next meeting is this coming Thursday. So nothing to report really there. If anyone has any questions, certainly feel free to ask. Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to item number 7. We have 4 action items. The first is a material challenge. We have we will be voting on a material challenge that was submitted from a citizen of Fargo, and it was regarding 4 Dr. Seuss titles. The statement of concern committee met and identified a recommendation for the library board.
So with that, I'm going to allow Jason, who heads up that committee, to walk through the recommendation. Thank you, Jason.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'm Jason DeShaw. I'm the head of collection development at Fargo Public Library. You can refer to the recommendation in the packet, but I'm just going to kind of walk through it briefly. So these are 4 of the 6 Dr. Seuss books that were recently in the news because the publisher, Dr. Seuss Enterprises, decided to no longer publish them, so they removed them from publication based on portraying people in ways that are hurtful and wrong. So outdated imagery of arguably racist imagery in these books. So they've decided as a publisher to not publish those anymore. And 4 of those 6 titles are currently in our picture book collection. The statement of concern is stating that we should remove or restrict access to these titles based on they could potentially damage children because of racist images. Our access to material policy, again, though, kind of states the exact opposite of that, that's not a reason that we would remove or restrict access to materials. I think that many of us are sympathetic to this, that we're not arguing that these images aren't problematic or racist, but that as a library, that's not our role. Our role is not to come in and tell people what their kids should and shouldn't read. We don't act in loco parentis. That's also one of our policies. And our role as a library is to provide access to materials so that the community can decide how to best use them. Because, I think, especially with these books, it's even more important than ever to have them with all the conversation happening and not to hide them from people because what's in there, but to have them potentially as teaching resources and have the access available to people as they see fit. So based on that, and because of our policies, that's why we voted as a committee, and it was unanimous vote to keep them as is in our collection.
Thanks, Jason. So does anyone have any questions for Jason or comments about the process or concerns or anything like that?
This is Chris. I just have one question. Who makes up that committee? Is there somebody from the general public that is a member of that committee?
No, it's staff that are part of that. And again, it's, Jason, if you want to walk through kind of the process that we've established per policy, if you could go through that when we receive a statement of concern.
Sure, yeah, and this is a board-approved procedure as well. Currently, when we receive a statement of concern, we collect those items and we look at those items. We do notify the patron of receipt, and we do invite the person who submitted it to the statement of concern meeting as well. And this person did join us for our meeting. We obviously review the titles. We look at our policies. We try to take as big a view as possible on that. And then after our meeting, we do, as we did here, we have discussion and we take a vote typically and come up with a recommendation for the board. So right now, the committee members are staff members only. That is how it is constructed right now.
I think in terms of your question is, again, the board is the policy, basic set policy for the library, and you are the citizens, essentially. So that is your role as citizen board members to have that discussion. Mr. Cohen is present currently. Just give me a heads up, Mary, if you
Sure.
want to give him the opportunity to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Cohen. If you would like to provide some insight or input, feel free.
Excuse me, I just dropped my hearing aid. I gotta put it back in.
No problem.
Well, I just walked in. I don't know if I missed any of the discussion or if you just began this discussion on this topic.
We had a few items on the agenda, and so we went through those first, and then this we probably started talking about just a couple minutes ago.
Well, I just heard that after the committee meeting that you take a vote on the issue, but I was at the meeting and it seemed like you took a vote on the meeting right at the end of the meeting, because I witnessed the vote, and it kind of seemed like it was fast to be voting on the issue right away. In fact, before there had been much of any discussion between any of the committee members. I mean, at least that was my subjective experience of it. They did give me quite a bit of time to give my opinion of the whole subject and explain my point of view, which I appreciated. And one person gave quite a bit of discussion regarding perhaps the library's point of view, and two other people gave a little bit of their opinions too. But from what I can remember, is there wasn't that much discussion between committee members. So maybe I was expecting there would be more discussion between them. I was expecting maybe a little bit more of a debate, because from my point of view, this is my first time to consider all of these issues, and they're much more complicated than I appreciated. Probably all of you understand these much better than I do. So it did get me thinking more about all of these complex topics. But I thought maybe the issue that I brought up would sort of get people thinking more about harm to children. Could these Dr. Seuss books possibly harm children or not? And I didn't really get the feeling that anyone considered that for a moment. But maybe, if I understand correctly, it's the library's position that the library will never consider whether or not a material will harm children, that it will always 100% be under the parent's responsibility to determine that. I guess, though, what I don't understand is that when you're considering what material to add to the collection, I think you do consider what would be harmful or not. But then there's a different criteria when you consider what to remove from the collection. And at that point, you will not consider what will be harmful or not. So for me, that I don't understand. And then with regard to, I got the statement, the recommendation from the committee. The committee said they will not remove these materials, but in fact, I didn't really ask them to. It wasn't black and white. I didn't ask them, please, absolutely remove these materials. In the discussion, I said, could these materials be put behind the librarian's desk and have an adult, whether that be a parent or guardian, request the material for the child? And that was not discussed. After the vote, came, then I asked about that. I said, why didn't you consider that? And then it was explained to me that, well, we did. We voted that we will not change the current access. So we will not change the access of it remaining on the shelf. But it wasn't explained why it could not be put behind the librarian's desk. Now, another idea someone gave to me since that time was, hey, why not put these materials in the transfer them to the adult collection, which I thought was a fantastic idea. But see, I think the committee should do a little more brainstorming on these type of things. Because for me, I can't give the committee all these ideas. I'm only one person, so I can give them one idea, but it takes more people to come up with different ideas. So I'm kind of thinking the committee, instead of taking an immediate vote, maybe should go and do some brainstorming and just get different ideas. Because I think that's an excellent idea, because these are historic books, and all Dr. Seuss books are. I have a feeling, I don't know, how many times these 4 Dr. Seuss books are taken out of the collection or not. I suspect they're still popular, and this would be a way for them to be retained in the collection. And any parent or guardian could take them out and give them to their children. But what this would do is prevent a random child from coming across them. If it's a child of Asian descent, Middle Eastern descent, or African descent, instead of going through the aisles themselves and coming across it and feeling bad about the racial stereotypical depictions, instead any adult could get these for their children. Let me see. The library's position, I understand, is that you'll not be parent. You will not be the parents of children. But I would say we also have to be realistic. Now, when I was a child in the 60s and 70s, we'd be dropped off in the children's section, and our parents would go to a different floor in the adult collection, and we'd maybe be alone for up to an hour. Things aren't done anymore quite that way in these days. But even if parents stay in the children's collection with their child, they can have more than one child, and oftentimes they keep an eye and stay close to the youngest child, a small toddler, and the older ones will go off by themselves, maybe into the stacks, and then affords an opportunity for the older children to open books and look through things. So in reality, even parents that try to closely guard what their children have access to will not always be able to determine what their children see or not. So I think that I understand where the library is coming from on this, but I think we also have to be realistic. And yes, as far as the collection development policy and the general selection criteria about the community being served, it refers specifically to the general population in Fargo becoming increasingly diverse. So what I would say is the point here is that the racist stereotypical depictions in the 4 books in question here are essentially out of date and particularly inappropriate to diverse populations of children now living in the community to view this type of racist stereotypical depictions of people similar to them. In terms of public demand, and skip that. In terms of the collection development policy, timeliness of information and/or significance of the subject, the picture books are outdated. They're certainly outdated in their depictions of human, in terms of racism via racist stereotypes. Seuss used the same type of illustrations he was using in the early 1940s for the U.S. government propaganda to smear Japanese Americans during World War II. Effective expression. If the intent was to create frivolous fun for children, it fails by needlessly bringing in cruel, racist, stereotypical depictions of Asians, Africans, and Middle Easterns. If Seuss's intent was to depict non-Caucasian races in these cruel ways, one can say he effectively expressed his intent, but at a cost to our children. And this is a miscellaneous point. If the claim is that removing historic racist material from the children's collection would set a precedent for removing books about trans children and gay families, I would argue that that is an obvious apples to oranges comparison, which either sounds like it's either an element of the political and or religious right is either an element of the political and or religious right is attempting to inoculate removal of racist material under the threat of attacks on the LGBTQIA community, or at least someone would like us to believe that argument. And I say that because one of the committee members did bring that up, that to remove anything from the collection would potentially set a precedent to remove anything else from the collection. But I think that this statement of concern process shows me that no, it wouldn't be that easy, because you have a process here that very carefully determines what will be removed and does not make it very easy to remove something. So no, I don't think any of you are going to make it easy for books about trans children or gay families to be removed. And it's a completely different subject than material that's racist and could be damaging to children. Unless you have a more elaborate explanation that I don't understand, which could be. And finally, I'd like to say that, I have come up here before at the City of Fargo Commission meetings, and I've talked about my concerns about open government. I've had concerns about the City of Fargo government having a culture of secrecy. From my point of view, there's many things that are very difficult for Fargo residents to find out about, and the city makes it very difficult for us to get information. In fact, will not give us information unless we file open records requests. And why should we? Why shouldn't they just give us the information? And also, we have city staff who actually are quite truculent and difficult with us when we do submit these open records requests, who won't respond to us for weeks at a time, though we ask them to please respond within 10 business days, who complain that there's too many back and forth emails, so on and so forth. And I guess so here I'm on my soapbox again, and I'll say that, I find that the process, dealing with the committee, the Statement of Concern Committee, it seemed to be the process was very opaque. Nobody told me what to expect. So when I came into the committee, I knew nothing. No one explained how this would unfold. I did not know who anybody was. I did not know I knew who two of the people was. I do know the director, and through the email, I knew Jason, that he was a staff member. The rest of the people, they could have been staff, they could have been community members. I didn't know. Nobody told me.
Mr. Cohen, they did introduce themselves at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay. Did they say that if they were staff or not?
Yes, they said what department they came from and where they worked.
Okay, I apologize. Sometimes my memory is not so good. It's faulty. But I didn't know. I didn't know exactly where anything was going, and I didn't know if there was going to be a vote. It's sort of like each step of the process was sort of like a surprise. Although of course this is my first time doing it, so I don't wish to complain too much. So maybe my first time doing it, maybe I should be ready for surprises. So I don't wish to complain too much. But also, Mr. Dirks, the thing is that if there's an open vote, now you have all your staff members there. Now, if I were a staff member, I would have concern about voting differently from you. Now, I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your staff members, whether it's a very friendly relationship or not. But if they voted differently from you, would they have any concern about keeping their job or not? If they did, that would represent a conflict of interest for them. So is it wise for you to be sitting on that committee? Also, I think that you're probably the most knowledgeable person on that committee. You hardly did any of the talking. I think you could have said more and explained more to me, and yet you sat back and really didn't explain anything. So I question that as well. Now, you and I have had certain disagreements in the past regarding some of my concerns, one in 2017 and one maybe earlier than that, the year before, I don't know which. But you and I don't really know each other other than that. But I'll just say that's my concern. But it's not personal because, I come before various government bodies and I just say what I think. So sometimes I offer constructive.
I'll answer that by saying
Okay.
I stand by the procedure and the policies involved in Jason's handling of the committee and how we came to the recommendation.
I don't understand your answer.
Well, I think, I might jump in here just for a second. We appreciate that you have these concerns, Mr. Cohen, and I think that the committee and the library board really means that we too, are concerned about the children of the community, but we do have a process for following that. And we do, as we represented in the statement of concern recommendation, the role of the library is not to act as parent to children with respect to material that some people would consider harmful or inappropriate. But I don't want to belabor that point so much as I want to touch on a few things that you mentioned. First of all, you talked about how you thought the decision was made very quickly and there wasn't much discussion. And so I was wondering if Jason perhaps could comment on kind of what went on behind the scenes before the meeting to prepare the board members to vote on that. Or not the board members, but the committee members to vote on it.
Yeah. I try very hard not to have a meeting before the meeting for this very reason. And I would say that there really weren't meetings before the meeting other than obviously, we've been talking about this much before the statement of concern. These are issues on our mind all the time. And when this was news, it's not a surprise to me that someone did submit a statement of concern. Our meeting was 45 minutes long. And so I felt we did have a good discussion. I certainly understand Mr. Cohen's concern that he felt maybe there wasn't a lot of amongst committee members back and forth. But I think that is also because we're very familiar with our policy and our policy is explicit. And so while we certainly have concerns and have discussions on our end, the statement of concern committee is there to respond to the statement of concern. And so I felt that we did that. And I think that there wasn't maybe a lot or any idea that we would restrict access to this based on how clear our policy is on it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that context. And I do also appreciate your comments, Mr. Cohn, about how to maybe change the information we provide to people who submit statements of concern. That might be something that we consider in terms of just making that process more predictable or user-friendly, to just let people know, you know, if you do show up at a meeting, this is what happens at the meeting, or, you know, after you submit your concern, this is the process that's followed by the staff to get to the point where they discuss it at the Statement of Concern Review Committee, and then that goes to the board, just so that you would have, you know, a little bit more context to going to that meeting, of being prepared for what the conversation would be, for instance. But I do really appreciate Jason's comment on, you know, certainly these are issues that have been brought to the attention of everybody on the library staff for probably a long time, that there's, you know, books out there that are getting this kind of attention from publishers and that sort of thing. And I guess I have a couple questions. You know, you did mention harm to children, how we would evaluate harm to children. However that is interpreted, both in our additions to the collection and then removing items from the collection. So is that something that comes into play in our decision making, or how do we deal with that?
You're asking me how you should deal with that?
Jason, if you could touch on that.
Yep, sorry, I'm speaking specifically to Jason as the collection development.
Sure, yeah. I think that certainly we are not purchasing things that cause harm because we feel like there needs to be both sides. Like, I don't think racism is something we need both sides of, right? We're not actively seeking out racist materials. I think that what most often happens is cases like this where it's something historically racist, where at one time this was perfectly acceptable to have in the library. And certainly Dr. Seuss is one of those things where we have a lot of Dr. Seuss books. And then, you know, society or cultural values change, and we see that, oh, that's not really, like, we wouldn't buy that today, you know. But I think that it's important to not remove items from your collection because of that, just because there was a, you know, a media story about this, essentially. You know, we shouldn't be dictating our collection based on what publishers think, or really any outside group. Again, we're trying to provide access to these materials. I think, again, with things like this, almost because it is a big story, it's more important to keep them because people are going to want to check them out. All of these are checked out right now, actually, because people probably were like, oh, well, what is the news about this? And so we want to make sure to provide those. And again, I think very reasonable common question that Mr. Cohen raised and in the past people have raised is, why don't we move these out of children's end and put them in the adult collection or somewhere else? And I think, again, that is just kind of the same thing as restricting access, because it's saying that, well, we know better. It says it's a children's book, or we don't think it's a children's book. And then that's us adding the subjectivity to it. And that's something we really try to avoid whenever we can as well. So did that answer your question? I don't know if it did exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, that really did. That makes a lot of sense. And I really appreciate how thoughtful you and the rest of the staff members are, and the folks on the committee, at, you know, making sure that you're really following the policies that are approved by the board and are published on the website and are very consistent with libraries across the country and world. So I think that was a very appropriate and complete answer.
I don't know how to raise my hand in this or anything.
Carlos.
Yeah, I don't know how to get your attention without interrupting on this.
Go for it.
Form stat. Okay. I think he may not have articulated this. Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for your comments. But I think what is being observed, or in the suggestion that this be put into the adult, that is an option, that into the adult collection, essentially is saying that the content of this book has evolved, right? And it is laying all representations are contingent and historically located, and we are at a historical moment that is different from the time it was conceived, right? It perhaps has evolved into an adult, right? It is the content is being seen, right? We have seen the editors who are interested in making sales, right? They have a definite economic interest in this, take it off, make an editorial decision not to continue this. Part of their decision did point out that there was still plenty in circulation, which I think means us. But I think that is about that is the one argument he's really made here that I think is valid with, considering our policy. That if this has evolved into an adult, right, that is, say, the person would be interested in this child's book, right, is its historical value has made it evolve into another era where it might be an adult book.
Carlos, if I may, and Mary, if I may, I see that as then we are in violation of the access to materials, because then we are acting as local parentis. In other words, we're the parental person seeing the children's book become an adult book, as opposed to the parent saying, I don't like this, I'm not going to check it out. At which point then there's a potential for additional, then we've put ourselves in that position of making these parental decisions, and then that won't be the end of us making parental decisions based on input. It will only increase that.
Okay.
In other words, we have taken on the mantle of deciding that this children's book is an adult book. And I would prefer that, in my mind, I see it as the policy's written, that it's a children's book. It was purchased as a children's book, professionally cataloged, put in the collection, at which point then we allow the parents, as our policy states, that we're not acting as local parentis, they are. So I guess if that's my thoughts on it, and certainly that was the thought process of the committee as well.
Okay. Okay, I understand that, and I'm just thinking that what I was trying to distill from the words of Mr. Cohn, that seems to be the one component of the argument that seems to be sustainable. We are obviously making a decision when we put a children's category, right? When we have a children's category, we're obviously making that decision then too. Again, I think the place where it becomes problematic here is that what we're talking about is essentially censorship. And I'd rather not censor and denying access. I don't think anybody is suggesting that. At the same time, I don't think any of us can deny, right, that it has changed with historical. It is contingent to its historical moment, and perhaps simply interest, right? We're at a moment of heightened interest now because a big deal has been made about an editor's decision, but that will blow over. That will blow over, and then we'll be able to see exactly what the public, what the consumers of our books want. And since it's no longer being printed, it won't be replaced, right? That is essentially letting the system, figure itself out.
So are you recommending a certain course of action, or are you just sharing your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm showing, I think, the part of the argument that Mr. Cohen is making that I think is reasonable. I think the decision of the committee seems to be equally reasonable and consistent with policy.
Right.
I'm a little bit, I don't find any of his other arguments really persuasive, except for that one. Yeah, that one that we do have something that has evolved in meaning, right, at the time. Now, there are children's books that were written in Chaucerian England that have to be adult books now because it's going to take an adult to be able to understand it, not because the topic is any different. So this is, to a degree, a historical thing. But also, it is getting attention for again, reasons that have very little to do with what we're talking about, with its content. I shouldn't say with its content, which has less to do with its content than the historical moment.
Thank you. Well, we do have to vote on this, and if anyone else on the board would like to voice any opinions or concerns or questions, feel free.
I'd like to say something more.
Let me make sure that I touched on the things I wanted to. Okay, go ahead.
Well, we've already agreed that that the library is not going to choose content that would perhaps be racist. So we've already decided that in a way you are being parents, so you are choosing content. So to put the content behind the library's desk or to transfer it to the adult collection, if you want to deem that now, so the parent can still choose whether or not the child will see it. It won't be removed from the collection entirely. So the parent still will retain choice whether or not the child will see it. I don't think that means that now, as Mr. Dirk said, that now you'll have to be deciding on every single book. No, you still have this policy and procedure here where your committee will decide on a case-by-case basis on each topic based on your policies. So no, I don't think that's a persuasive argument. And furthermore, no one has answered my original statement of concern about why is there no policy that addresses content that is harmful to children. You're missing a policy here. There is no policy regarding content that's harmful to children. The only policy is we will not decide what's harmful to children. That's not an answer.
Well, I think that the access to materials policy specifically says the library will not restrict access to library materials under the assumption that certain materials may be harmful to minors or in an effort to avoid controversy with parents. I mean, in my view, that is the policy on how to deal with harmful materials. We are not going to make a determination of what is and is not harmful and restrict censorship or restrict access to those materials. That's the policy. Now, if that policy needed to be reviewed, that's something that the board can certainly do. We review these policies and revise them on an ongoing basis. But I think that is the answer to your question. I mean, that's what we do with quote unquote harmful materials is we do not restrict access to them. And I think that your comments are well taken. And I think that, as you said, or as Jason said, excuse me, everyone is concerned about harm to children in general, but everyone's opinion on that may not be the same. And the policy is written, and I think in this case was followed. Does anyone else have any other comments on that? Questions? Otherwise, I think we should probably entertain a vote on this.
This is Chris, and I make a motion to entertain a vote on whether to accept the committee recommendation.
This is Rachel. I got a question before we do that. I'm wondering about, so this idea about moving this to the adult, reclassifying it as an adult book. Can somebody explain, are children still allowed to, if they wanted to come to the library, are they still allowed to walk into the adult section of the, collection of the library and cruise that at their leisure, or is
Absolutely.
that supervised? So I'm wondering if really, if just moving it over to a different shelf is going to have an impact that folks, think it might, potentially by pitching that as an idea, when in practice that section is not, it sounds like a child can walk into that section and grab the book there. Especially if they look it up on the call system, if that's the book that they're trying to find, they look it up in the call system and then they just walk over to the adult section. So I don't know if that really solves anything. But yeah, so that was my question.
Right. I don't know, Rachel, if you heard my answer, but no, we don't sequester children to one part of the library at all, because every individual is different in terms of their reading level and their knowledge, where they are as individuals. So we'd be happy, kids in all areas of the library. And again, that's, again, we don't act as local parentists, it's the parents. And yeah, I mean, if folks want to browse the library, we want them to browse the library, regardless of age, and that conversation that they have with their parents and we support and we encourage parental involvement with their children in regards to what they check out, what they're reading, what they're watching, what they're listening to. And certainly then we don't restrict access within any library location based on age.
Does that answer your question, Rachel?
Yes, it does help me think more about that suggestion about moving it to the adult section. So thanks, Tim.
Good point. Thank you. And I heard, Kristen, you said something, but I'm sorry, I didn't quite make out what you said.
No, I was just, I wanted to make a motion to bring this to a vote at this time.
Okay, so we need to move for either approving this recommendation by the Statement of Concern Committee or rejecting the recommendation by the Statement of Concern Committee. So would you like to make a motion specifically as to one of those directions?
Yes, I do. I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of the committee.
Thank you.
This is Scott. I'll second.
Any further discussion on this issue? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of accepting the recommendation of the Statement of Concern Committee regarding the several Dr. Seuss books, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries, and the recommendation of the Statement of Concern Committee is approved. Therefore, the Dr. Seuss books in issue will remain accessible and in circulation in the Children's Department. But I do want to thank Mr. Cohen for, first of all, submitting the Statement of Concern, which we always welcome, and it's really important to talk about these things. Obviously, the library has very specific policies and philosophies that it follows when it makes these decisions, but it's always, we're always welcome to talk these things through and make sure that everyone understands what our policies are. And he did also have some good suggestions on how to deal with the committee meetings, maybe providing people some more information. So we will take that under advisement as well. And we always like it when people come to our meetings because that doesn't happen very often. So we'll move on. We still have 3 items left for action. And the first one is the art display and acquisition policy. Let me see here. I got a lot of pieces of paper. So
Sure.
looks like there are a few policies that haven't been reviewed for a while, 3+ years. And so this is one of them. Did you care to speak about that, Tim?
Sure. Per your packet, yeah, it's just having a review refresher on a number of policies. And the first one up is art display and acquisition. Certainly, it's not up for, we not have any issues with it. It's more of just a board review kind of situation. And it served us really well in terms of when we're having folks show art at the various locations.
Okay. I will entertain some discussion on this if anyone has any questions, comments on this policy. I guess I have just a comment or a question. You know, this was specifically salient this week at this time because of our discussion about the materials or the statement of concern. But, you know, the third paragraph says the Fargo Public Library is strictly neutral in matters of religion. The library doesn't promote nor participate in any sponsorship or active involvement in religious activities. Therefore, in respect of all faiths, displays containing materials of a religious nature or on a religious theme cannot be accepted. You know, I feel like this is a little bit in conflict with our policy saying that, you know, we're not going to censor things because, you know, I think if we were neutral, arguably, instead of saying, you know, we have a zero tolerance policy, we would say everybody's welcome and we won't discriminate. So I'm just curious what the reasoning is there.
I think where that came from, obviously this was established well before I got here, but I think the discussion came as a city department, an extra sensitivity there in terms of governmental church and state kind of situation. That, you know, if you have one, you need adequate representation of other folks. That's what I believe the kind of the genesis of that paragraph is coming from. Sure.
I mean, I could argue on that. I won't, but I just thought it's somewhat, in my opinion, a little bit in conflict with our general philosophy that we shouldn't censor things. You know, I'm sure that we don't disinclude things in the circulation of, you know, books and stuff like that because has a religious theme. So anyway, just something to think about maybe as an issue potentially in the future that could come up, but I am not going to request any changes be made. Would anyone like to entertain a motion on this or make a motion to approve or make any changes?
This is Chris Schipper, and I will make a move to continue the art display and acquisition policy currently in place.
Okay. Anyone second that?
Second.
Carrie Peterson, second.
Okay, 2 seconds by Scott and Carrie. Thank you. All in favor of approving the art display and acquisition policy as it currently is, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. The art display and acquisition policy is approved. The next one is the bulletin board and brochure table policy.
Yeah, it certainly just, again, put some form of ground rules around that. And again, it's helped us. We've not run into a lot of issues, obviously, with this. It's pretty straightforward.
Yes. Good to have a policy, though. Does anyone have any questions or comments or edits to this policy?
I'd like to move to approve.
Thank you, Carlos.
Chris Schipper, I'll second.
Okay, so all in favor of approving the bulletin board and brochure tables policy as it currently is, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries and the bulletin board and brochure policy or table policy is approved as is. Okay, finally, we have the 2022 library budget proposal.
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Per your packet there, you see, starting out, gave a little bit of background, and obviously the big thing is us, looking forward to 2022 and really re-engaging back in the community, especially due to the unprecedented service interruptions of 2020 and kind of continuing currently into 21. With that, you can see the staffing requests are 2 full-time reference associates, and this will really help us in terms of just capacity for staffing reference desks. And the big thing there is our current model really is a legacy of when the Fargo Public Library was a single location. And, every, professional librarian essentially assisted at that desk. Well, obviously, we've grown considerably since then, and now we have, senior admin folks based at our current level of staffing have to assist at reference desks. At the same time, as you've read, the workflow at reference has really evolved from heavy hitting reference questions to really tech assistance, which is just the common, just the predictable evolution to where we are. Also, again, looking for re-engagement, we need those folks. We need our professional librarians out in the community in terms of community engagement, work, having a profile out in the community with different nonprofit boards or what have you, and not just providing tech assistance. Not that that's not important, but an efficiency of who we are as an organization for us to grow is building up our capacity and staffing in terms of reference. So you can see there the 2 full-time reference associates, what we'll be asking, asking for soon. The other one, kind of looking towards the future, is, and again, this was identified back in our strategic plan, is going through a facilities master planning process, really looking at the needs of the community, kind of where the populations are, how we're being used currently, kind of the space needs currently as we are, because yes, our current one, if you can call it current, facilities plan is from 2004, which obviously Fargo is just a tad different now than it was back in 2004. Moving on, in terms of the operating budgets, you can see the divisions. Obviously, the first one is Maine, the second one is Carlson, and the third one is the Northport branch. Looking at line item increases, and they're pretty straightforward. The big ones that we're looking for is marketing. What that $19,000 represents is of our current $27,000 that we have for a full year's worth of marketing, you automatically, at the beginning of the year, have to understand that $19,000 of that is already accounted for at our current level of marketing based on our programs. I would like to expand that. Had a talk with Kiwanis on Monday, and they're like, we gotta, what can we do for more marketing because we know there's more kids, more families out there that could use the library. And I said, well, we're trying to work on that. And again, it's not just a standard situation. We're not going from a standard year to another standard year in terms of our service model. We have to re-engage our service model and get it out into the community. So that's a key piece. Other numbers, certainly additional money for programming, looking to expand that is part of the process. In terms of books and materials, you can see the money identified there. That is primarily for the growth of e-content, obviously some print, but e-content obviously over the past year really grew tremendously based on certainly the service interruptions and being close to the public. And we see that trend probably continuing. In terms of the other branches, you can see for the next one, 101, 7012, 463. Again, especially also at Maine and at Carlson, you can see the 1,400 part-time seasonal, getting that to $12 an hour. Now, originally in budget development for 2020, I had put in for the $12 an hour rate for those folks, the part-time seasonal, which are essentially our pages that do all the shelving. And prior to that, we were going through pages quite a bit. The turnover in that position was significant, which is also a huge drag on staff time for rehiring. Originally, that hour rate was supposed to be put into the 2020 budget in mid-year, which it never happened based on impacts of the pandemic. Obviously, we're looking to make that happen. Now, obviously, we did put those people at $12 an hour. We've reached a level of stability in terms of those positions and certainly want to cover that. Other ones you can see are pretty standard. Security increases just based on rate increases. Rent at Northport based on increases on rent. And then you can see on the revenue side, just expected library fines and fees, obviously with going fine-free, we're just basically lost items estimations. State aid there, you can see it as 154,000 and just miscellaneous revenue around 8,000 based on a 12-month look back. So those are the big three legs of the chair: staffing, capital, and operating, with just kind of an overview of revenue. I'll entertain any questions.
It's exciting that you're spending some money and attention on re-engagement. Hopefully people will realize how much they missed the library and they'll be rip-roaring, ready to get back in there.
We'll make it happen.
So we have to just approve, we have to approve this.
Well, I think it should be bigger, but I'll move to approve.
I'll second that motion. So any discussion? All in favor of the 2022 library budget proposal, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion carries and the 2022 library budget proposal is approved. All done with the action items. Moving on to statistical reports, we have March usage and March financials.
Yes, per your packet. What a year. Comparing this March with the previous March when we closed, I can finally say that we have an increase in circulation over the previous year, which I haven't been able to say since like last February, or February from a year ago. So yeah, you can see it there. Again, on the second page of circulation, you can see, especially the non-print, the electronic books, that continues to be strong. picking up on a number of things. Programming, certainly from the first page up from last March. So, it's one step at a time. And again, looking for going back to standard summer hours as of June 1st. We're excited to see how that impacts, obviously, visits and circulation. So positive numbers on the circulation front. We're excited about that.
Excellent. Any questions on usage or comments? Okay, let's go on to the financials.
Yes, in terms of the donation summary, on the revenue end, you can see we received a couple $5 donations, one from Eric Oberroy and one anonymous, and also $100 from the Valley Reading Council for a Dr. Seuss Day. And on the expense side, the $91 was the last money going out from the Giving Hearts teen promotion that we did. And the $375 is thank you, friends, for the way to go for staff recognition. And also the National Library Workers' Day gift mentioned by Megan, the water bottles and the candy. So thank you, friends, for your generous donation for assisting our hardworking staff. In terms of operating, certainly through the first quarter of the year, 25% of the year lapsed. We're just under 24% expended. Obviously, continue to monitor that as we go through. Pretty much steady as she goes right there. And revenue is its amount as you see it there.
Okay. Sounds great. Any questions, comments? Okay. Friends of the Library report.
There are no friends present.
All right. Any public comment?
No public present.
Okay. Then our next regular meeting is May 18th, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.